Hey everyone. In today's episode, I'm going to get into the principle of getting into property early and not being late. It's a topic that's different to a lot of ones that I have done in the past, and the reason for this is because I want to get into fundamentally the psychology of why this is really important and why a lot of people fail. So in today's episode, I'll get into a few things. Firstly, the historical context. Secondly, how markets behave. Thirdly, what you need to do. And then finally, the best positioned markets. Let's get into the historical context of prices. So here's just some data. This is from McCrindle. So this is just an actual demographics survey. Not a survey, but it's a historical actual graph of the prices by property location in 1975. So you'll see clearly there, basically, they weren't actually that differently priced. Obviously, Sydney and Canberra were out quite far in front. As you can see, 28,000 and 26,500 right there, respectively. But all the other cities, being Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and Hobart, all actually similarly priced there. So that's just basically the prices in 1975. So obviously, it's changed quite a bit from today, but that's the prices they were in 1975 as an aggregated median. Another key thing just we want to know too is in historical context is just the credit and the broad money supply that's in the system. So, pretty much since the 70s and especially post the 90s, there's been a lot more, obviously, money in the system, and that's largely due to credit. So just here, this is a graph from the ABS with APRA and RBA data there, and it's just aggregated data if everyone wants to know. You can see clearly there, especially since the early 90s, and that's especially when rates started to really come down from those 90 highs. You've got quite a lot of money and liquidity, should I say, in the system there, and that's only actually going to 2018. So since 2020, that number has gone up exponentially, similar to what happened sort of between the late 90s to about 2008 there. So you can expect the graph to go like that right up in 2025, and we're in a interest rate cutting cycle as well. So that will only continue. That's not something that's going to slow down. That is set to continue for the next few years at the very least. So that's just another thing historically to take into consideration with where we're at. Let's get into a little bit of market behavior. And look, to give everyone an idea, markets do go up, yes, over the long term, but it's not in a linear fashion. Now, what I'm showing here is this is actually just from the CoreLogic 30-year report that came out in 2022. And this will just show you basically the aggregated capitals for both houses and units. Then it'll also show you regionals for both houses and units as well, pardon me. And basically you can see here, if you really want to pause and zoom in, just all the different things that have happened here. So you'll notice just all the little different traits, but you can see there, if you aggregated that this is already, mind you, aggregated as in combined capitals, but if you did that in line of best fitted, it just look a lot like a line going up. But sure, we have definitely had some periods of I'd say stability and some periods of major growth, particularly, in the mid 2010s and also just the recent COVID boom as well. And you could probably say the late 90s, early 2000s there too. Mind you, this data as well is quite aggregated to Sydney and Melbourne, and you could probably include Brisbane in there too, because that is basically 80% of Australia that live in those regions and surrounding areas are there too. So just something to consider. Markets don't operate in linear fashion. Look, when we go looking at markets too, just something you want to know is that markets aren't linear, number one, but secondly, when they react, they generally overreact. So when they're going very badly, they'll generally go down a bit and just stabilize up and down for a number of years, and that's just what happens. But when they go up, there's basically an overreaction to the boom. So they go up more than they're probably supposed to, and they probably stabilize for longer than they're supposed to. It's just behavioral finance and behavioral economics kind of at play there. So I'll show you this just in the case of a few cities. So I did go through this previously in a few episodes, but this is just on the left here. You can see Perth did basically nothing between pretty much 92 and about 02. Then it went absolutely ballistic for the 5 years after, then basically stabilized right out to post the COVID era. If you look of when COVID started and where it is today in 2025, you would have a similar reaction kind of there. You might have a year or two left, don't get me wrong, but that's a case of it just overreacting in growth and then over overreacting, also just instability there too. And on the right-hand side there, Brisbane is no different. Similarly, nothing to about 2002, then did very well for a little bit of more prolonged period to 2012. Then nothing new about, I'd say, you could probably say 2019, and it's just gone ballistic again since. So it's just, the demand has basically just subsided, and people have got, they've overreacted to it doing poorly, which has kept it down for longer. But with the minute it breaks its cycle, what's happened is everyone who has overreacted to doing poorly has then piled straight back in the market. So that's why this happens. Now, this is no different to even somewhere like Hobart. So on the left here, you'll see as well, again, 02 to about probably 2010, pretty good performance, maybe not as good as Brisbane or Perth. And then from about 2017 to about 2022, it's probably, mind you, 2015, really, it's not 2017. Very good performance. And now it's just stabilising too. That's where Hobart is at. And even for our major cities, you do get them running in cycles too. So you can see Sydney there from about 02 to about 2012 did quite poorly. I'd say then from about 2012 to probably about 2019, it did very well. Now, sure, the COVID boom did bump it up a little bit, and that's probably a dead cat bounce because we had 0.1% interest rates, and that may never happen again, to give everyone an idea. Look, it might, but it's probably unlikely for a fair period of time anyway. But that's what can happen even in Sydney, and that's historically, quite good performing market. So that's another thing we just want to consider here, because it can happen in even your, should I say, longer term good performing markets that have a lower sense of standard deviation there. So it happens in Sydney at the moment. It has happened in Melbourne in the sense of how long it's basically stayed down for as well, since about 2018, 2017 for some suburbs. But that's really kind of where we're at. So let's get into the next key part of this, and that's what to do. So what we need to know here is, what you need to really do is, first of all, you need to upgrade yourself. Now, I mean this in the best way possible, and it's not me trying to be hard on anyone or me trying to, piss people off or anything like that. It's just the truth. Now, you'll see on the left just here, the suburbs where workers on 300K can't afford a house. Now, that is predominantly at the moment mainly your really upmarket, you're not really upmarket, it's your upmarket Sydney suburbs, and it's also some of your really upmarket Brisbane and Melbourne suburbs. So you could probably include, your Cottesloe, Peppermint Grove, Perth there too, but it's not many suburbs outside really Sydney, particularly Sydney and Melbourne. But as the market goes up, this will continue to be a thing, and that's 300,000. So you could even take that to right down to 150, and the vast majority of good suburbs most people can't afford today. And it's going to continue to go up. So your choice really is, do you want to sit here and watch it do what it does? Because the market is an unemotional thing. Or do you want, let's say, just to, actually try to make something of yourself and actually get in and get ahead of the curve, because you'd rather actually have it, helping you longer term and actually taking action than just sitting there and doing nothing. And where I'm actually going with this is, if you look on the right just here, dwelling to price income ratios, and you can see in basically every single city since sort of the 80s and 90s, it's gone up substantially how much income you need, and that's the multiple of income you need per city. Now, this is, mind you, only dwellings. So if you're saying dwellings, that's including units as well, which don't go up by much. You'd probably have to add somewhere between 3 and 5 to this of the ratio to make that for houses, especially for Sydney and Melbourne particularly, and even all of them, to be honest. It's not only Sydney and Melbourne. So you're really looking at probably somewhere around 7 to probably 15. Sydney's obviously at 15 times income ratios. This is average income, mind you, to actually get a dwelling. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is going to continue to be a thing. Sydney is a global city. If you look at some of the cities that have been there for a lot longer than Sydney, places like Frankfurt, about 80% of people rent there. So this is going to continue to happen. And the key thing that you need to do is you need to upgrade yourself and be ahead of the curve so you can get into the right suburbs and the right markets for this. Really, really important in that. As I said before, the market really waits for no one. So this is just inflation-adjusted house prices since basically the 70s. And you can see it's gone from about 0.3 right up to about, it's hit 1.5. If you want to go right up further than that, it goes right up past literally the 1.5 to about 1.8 mark. So that's another thing you probably want to consider there as well. The hardest part is also saving to get in the market, and it's the deposit I'm really talking about here. So this is just some aggregated data again, and it's just the median dwelling value to income ratio for capital cities. So you'll just see here, this is actually aggregated off what I was talking about last time as well, just the actual dwelling to ratio value there right now. This here alone, what it's showing really is that it's taking longer and longer and longer to save up for actually get in the market, because the actual dwelling price is going up to your income, which then means the deposit is also harder. Now, when you're saying a loan something like, let's say 8 times your income for the asset, let's say the average person is on 100 grand, that's $800,000, right? So the deposit for that's 160,000 plus closing costs, right? Now that's about $200,000, and it's even more depending on the city you're in sometimes. And that's quite a lot of money with the cost of living these days as well. That's pretty crazy if you think about it, because I mean, there's not many people who could probably save up $200,000, I mean, in, the space of even 10 years. Most people would take probably 10 years to save that, maybe even longer. So really what I'm saying here is, if you can, and you can even get something with a higher LVR, let's say it's a 90 LVR or something like that, especially if you're a professional and you can take advantage of no LMI, if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer maybe, or an anaesthetist, dentist, or an owner builder is another good one, for example, some tradies. It's a good idea if you have enough money just to get in and make sure you get in the right suburb. So that's what I'll go into next, but that's really important. The deposit's always the hardest part. So if you feel like a bit under the weather, or you feel like it's evading you, don't give up. Just keep trying, get that deposit in, and once you have the ability to go ahead. Let's just get in an overview as well with where the cities are today, and also where the best areas to buy in. So this is just my property clock in July of basically 2025, so not long ago. And you'll see basically here, just to give everyone a quick summary, 12 to 3 is downturn, 3 to 6 is stabilization, 6 to 9 is upturn, 9 to 12 is boom, 11 to 12 is a winner's curse phase of the boom, which is when things are quite euphoric and it's gone up so much that, some people think it can't lose. But you can clearly see here that, your Adelaide, Perth, Sunny Coast, Goldie, and Brisbane are all well into the boom phase. Look, Brisbane does have a bit more to go than a few of these others. And the reason being is because you've got a bit of a better diversified income, and your fundamentally strong areas actually still have a bit to go as well. But on the flip side of that, in your stabilisation to your upturn phase, really, you got Hobart, Wollongong, Sydney, Central Coast, Newcastle, Geelong, and Melbourne. No doubt my number one draft pick is Melbourne on that. It is literally just turning into its upturn phase, done nothing for a number of years, and it's our best performing market longer term. So not much can really go wrong there if you're buying at the very bottom of the cycle. So that's kind of where we're at with all the cities. Pretty obvious where you should be parking your money, in my opinion, unless you need to live in one of the locations that are already boomed. So obviously there's each their own, but to me, that's really, where I'm kind of looking at. And I'll get into the actual parts of the cities that are kind of your best areas. So I'll start that with my number one draft pick anyway, and that's Melbourne. Your inner west, you've got predominantly Maribyrnong and Hobsons Bay council regions, particularly the ones with villages and higher median income or gentrifying areas. They're your best areas. Your inner east is basically I'd say basically right out to probably Box Hill down to Burwood and into the city from there. Starting from about Hawthorn Q. All of those areas quite good between there. Obviously a high price point, so that's something to consider. Your inner cities mainly, I'd say your Yarra and Moonee Valley Council areas, certain suburbs there, very high income suburbs are good. Try to get a detached house if you can. If you can't, at the very least, it needs to be exceptionally well located in those areas. Other than that, your inner south, southeast is basically your parts of Stonington and your Port Phillip Council regions. Those areas are quite good. Basically Port Melbourne right out to about Caulfield, I'd say Elwood. Really good in that. All of them haven't done that much. Obviously higher price point as well, but good areas in that. Inner north, your Brunswick East, Alphington, right out to kind of Essendon, Aberfeldy. That area is good too. No, don't go too much further north than that. And finally, your Bayside. Bayside, I'd say though, just for everyone, be a little bit careful, just simply because some of these areas actually in COVID, because they were locked down, did go up about 50 or 60%. So don't buy in those suburbs. That's my summary of Melbourne. It's my number one draft pick, and that's the areas you should predominantly look at buying in. Let's get into Geelong. A little bit of a smaller city. Think of it as a microcosm of Melbourne. For those around Australia, I'd consider Geelong as the Wollongong of Melbourne. It's about that far for Sydney siders, but has the income demographics of Newcastle. Best areas in Geelong is your inner city, so it's your Geelong West, East Geelong, the kind of around there, and well positioned surrounding suburbs. So I mean, Breakwater, Thompson, some pockets of Newcombe, some pockets of North Geelong are all good. If you have under 500k, some parts of Corio are okay. Just be very careful. But that's Geelong. It's not an area I'd recommend people buy if you don't know it very well, or Melbourne. Like, it's these areas you really need to know them back to front, because there's some of the best parts of Geelong, like even in, for example, Geelong West and East Geelong, there's just areas I wouldn't touch in those suburbs. So it's not a case of just, throwing a dartboard, buying in the suburb and saying I got a good buy. It doesn't kind of really work like that. So just consider that as well. Newcastle, it's a bit of a more funny one, but the easiest way for me to describe it is predominantly your best areas are Ward 1 and Ward 2 of the Newcastle Council plan. So your Ward 1 is kind of inner city, inner west, so it's right out to about Mayfield West from the city. And your Ward 2 is kind of from the city as well, but along the beaches and up to about Adamstown Heights. That's kind of where your Ward 2 is. These are all the best locations. Your Ward 1 really is your gentrifying kind of city suburbs. Your Ward 2 is your beaches and sort of more affluent sort of neighbourhoods like the Hill, Bar Beach, Merriweather, the Junction, those kinds of areas. So that's Newcastle. Again, don't throw a dartboard at Newcastle. It won't work. An area that I know back to front, but anyway, that's Newcastle. Central Coast, so bit of a very spread out area. It's a bit different to a lot of other areas of Sydney. Not a lot of people really know it that well, even if they're from Sydney or travelled there. The Central Coast runs pretty much right up to about Norah Head, Doyleson, right down to basically the Hawkesbury actually catchment down there, and it's very spread out, and it's not all locations are good. So the areas that you really want to buy in are close to the major corridors. If you want to find out where they are, you just need to do a bit of research on government websites. You'll find it quite easily, and key lifestyle areas. So these sorts of areas, like lifestyle areas, a good example is Terrigal, Avoca. That's a good area of it. The entrance to probably Shelley Beach is another. They're lifestyle locations. Your corridors around that, where the jobs are basically areas you want to buy. It's not as simple as throwing a dartboard again at the Central Coast. It's quite complicated. So get someone like me who actually knows what they're talking about to do it if you're going to do so. Let's get into Sydney, and quite a large area, lots of suburbs. Eastern suburbs, Lower North Shore are definitely your best buys. They lead the charge. They have the best capital growth. Inner West is also very good. That's your cheapest price point you're really going to be able to buy in. So definitely consider that in terms of buying in Sydney. It's a good market to consider buying in. I quite like it, and longer term great growth there as well. So just consider that for Sydney. Upper North Shore, Northern Beach is also quite good. Just be a little bit careful which suburb you're buying in. There does tend to be a little more stock in some areas. So just consider that as well. There's a freaking fly pissing me off here, so sorry guys, my eyes are sort of going, but anyway. The Southern Shire, inner south and southwest, are also not too bad. Southern Shire, be careful, because there is quite a bit of land in some areas and quite a bit of, I'd say, demographics that I don't think suit very well. Inner south and southwest are quite good, so that's kind of like right out from Alexandria. Probably right out to, I'd say, anywhere maybe Belmore, probably right out to maybe Bexley, Cogra kind of location as well. A bit of St George there too. So, some areas to buy in here, but Sydney, this is predominantly for Sydney-siders, for people that need to live here. I'd much rather you go to probably Melbourne or Newcastle, somewhere like that, or maybe even Geelong, if it's for an investment, because you got much better yield. A lot of these Sydney suburbs, you're going to struggle to even get over like 3.2% yield, and it's just simply because houses are so expensive in this location. So just something to consider for everyone there as well. Let's get into Wollongong. I actually went to uni down here, so know it very well. look, it's another area. The good thing about Wollongong, I guess, is the escarpment. So it's the basically high hills of the dividing range that run by there. And that does limit stock. So that's a really good thing. But there are quite, I'd say, different areas that you should consider investing. So the most common one that people would know is definitely your northern suburbs, so north of the CBD. They're your best capital growth suburbs, predominantly well located, generally good schools there, nice beaches, good lifestyle locations. The other one's well located suburbs there. So I mean, around your CBD, generally, I'm talking about there and other well-located ones that are a little bit underpriced, and also your gentrifying suburbs. So there are areas of Wollongong that are going through gentrification, are changing a lot, that were very dodgy in the past. Look, to contrast what a suburb of that did happen was a suburb called Taronji in Wollongong. Now, that was very derelict in the early 2000s and late 90s. A lot of the public housing was sold off in the 2000s though. And you got like houses selling there for, I mean, I kid you not, above 2 million, sometimes even 3 that are on the beach side of it. So that's going to happen here too. But it's not going to be all parts of Wollongong. So that's just something to consider. It's a very, very much so a location. You need to know where you're buying. And also, it's every location really is. And also you need to know the streets, you know, what kind of goes on there. And also the quality of tenant you'll get in some parts of Wollongong will be a lot better than others. So just consider those as well. Look, finally, I've been talking to people about this, and I mean, you know, I did want to mention it, but it's not predominantly an area I've bought in a lot, or should I say, that I am targeting a lot. Like if the right deal comes, yes, I'll consider it, but it's got to be very right, because I mean, Melbourne, Geelong, Newcastle, and all of those areas are better buys at the moment. But the final one that is still in a decent part of its market cycle is Hobart. It's in its stabilisation phase. Look, it may be a few years before it does start to kick into its upturn, but you're not really going to lose money here, because you're buying it, I mean, the bottom of its stabilisation phase anyway. But for people that don't know it well, look, the areas you really want to consider buying is probably the inner city of Hobart. So it's around, I mean, the major sort of CBD areas. It's the suburbs basically surrounding any suburb that has Hobart in it, if that makes sense. It's those kinds of suburbs. And then it's fully landlocked, higher demographic suburbs. So there are some on the sort of north shore of Hobart there in the north that aren't too bad either. All of these suburbs, mind you, do actually get a fairly decent yield. So if you don't have much of a budget and you don't want to buy in Victoria, it is actually an option, to be fair. You can still pick them up for, I mean, under 700,000, which is pretty good. And there's not really any location in Australia other than Geelong you can pick it up for. So, look, not a bad buy, but what I'd say is to people, just remember it is in its sort of early stabilisation phase, so it might stay flat for a number of years. Just remember that. But you're not buying somewhere that is at the top of its boom or something like that. It's past its boom, it's stabilised, past its downturn. You know, you've got the whole cycle ahead. Look, it may take like 10 to 15 years for it to end its cycle, whereas I think Melbourne and Geelong is probably 7 to 10. But you're still not terribly buying here. So that's just another thing to consider. For my Tassie viewers, I hope you're happy with me. I've had a few of you reach out, so happy days there anyway. But look, I thank everyone for watching this video. A little bit different to a lot of the other ones that I've done. But the reason for that is obviously I'd like to sort of contrast and differentiate some of the topics I go into, because it's important for everyone. But look, for those who are really serious about getting in the market and looking for a buyer's agent, I strongly suggest you reach out via www.compoundinvest.com.au/inquire. Basically what happens there is we have a free 30-minute phone call that we discuss what we can do, what you're looking to do, go through a bit of a strategy and everything like that. And look, what I'd like to say as well is for people that might be, you know, looking, let's say, in 3 to 6 months or something like that, or even you might even be someone who is sitting on the fence a little bit and just wants someone to talk to about, I still strongly suggest you do that, because the strategy itself is more important than the purchase. It's probably 95% strategy, 5% purchase. Obviously, you want to get the purchase right, but the strategy is even more important, because everyone should have a different strategy based on who they are and what outcomes they want. Look, a doctor who is 32 years old should invest the same as someone who is single and 55 and wants to retire in 10 years, for example. They're two completely different people, right? And also different incomes too. So, I mean, that's just something to consider. But look, I really appreciate everyone watching this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.